Hello and welcome to TechNow, the web series for admins, builders, and developers on a wide variety of ServiceNow platform topics. My name is Chuck Tomasi, and it is my great pleasure to bring you another episode of TechNow. Hope everybody's doing well. Holidays are going well. Of course, if you're watching this in July of 2025, celebrate whatever holidays you like. Let's get on with the show with some quick introductions. As I said, my name is Chuck Tomasi. I've been on the platform for about 13 years. Customer since 2010. No, customer before 2010, and then an employee since then. I can't keep this straight anymore. There's been too many things going on. Lots of other hobbies and interests, but in the interest of getting more content to you, I'm going to gloss over this, and we can have a friendly chit-chat the next time we meet in person or online. So glad you're here. Let's get to our next host, Kreg Steppe.
Hey there. I am the Senior Manager of Cloud Labs. I provide all the training, the infrastructure for all the training classes that we offer at ServiceNow, as well as a lot of the events, like when you go to Knowledge and we have all those labs. That's my handiwork in the back end. I've been here since 2014 because Chuck wouldn't shut up about ServiceNow and how great it was. Had to drag me over here, so I will now pass it over to Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Kreg. My name is Jeremy Duncan. I'm a platform architect here at ServiceNow. I've been, much like Chuck, been a customer for a little over a decade now here at ServiceNow for about 2 years. I do work on our workflow design studio team. We are a sales support organization where we go dream big with our customers. And so just happy to be here, happy to introduce our next wonderful speaker, and definitely going to glaze through mine too because he's got some great stuff to talk about. So next up, Mr. Brad Tilton.
No stranger to the developer program.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I am also a senior developer advocate like Chuck. I think we got started about 2 months apart on the platform. So I have been a customer, partner, and employee. I do a lot of the developer program stuff, like running the Dev MVP program, speaking at meetups, and that type of thing. And I'm excited to get into today's show. So I will go ahead and pass it back off.
Kreg, would you do the honors?
That's right. Okay. Sure, I can do that. So today we're going to be talking about building custom experiences in UI Builder, and we're going to see Brad give us a nice, beautiful demo, of course. And, of course, along the way, throughout the whole show, we have Q&A. So throw those questions in there, and as time permits, we'll break in and answer some of those. And remember, afterwards, if we don't get to your question during the show, we will have those answered and in the community. When I'll say, Chuck, you'll have it an hour after the show, right? No, not really. No, but they will show up there, and you'll get a notification. So, also, don't forget, speaking of Chuck, we got the Breakpoint password, the Breakpoint podcast. I
got to go change my password.
That's all right. Now go change your password. What you got going on the Breakpoint? I started to say password again. The podcast. What do you got going on?
We've broken tradition. Instead of going every other week, Brad and I are actually having a discussion right now about what it takes to be a ServiceNow developer, from getting started to finding your path and resources, community. There's a weekly series that will take us through the end of 2021. So I invite you to get that, share that with colleagues who may be interested or just getting started. We've got some great information. Shorter than usual. It's not a 30-minute chat. I think the longest one was, about 20 minutes, Brad? So look for those every Wednesday in late November and throughout December. So Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah and whatever other holidays you want to celebrate between now and the end of the year.
That's right. You can break a podcast with Chuck. And as you learn about how to be a developer, I think this is a great little segue to the developer portal over at developer.servicenow.com. where you can get a free developer instance. There's documentation, there's guides, reference, a lot of information about meetups, as you can see here in the developer blog, so you can find out about different topics that other people think are interesting and maybe something they learned and they want to pass it along. So there's plenty of information over there that that you can get for free over at the developer.servicenow.com, excuse me. And of course, here we go. I'm going to turn it over to Brad.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Also, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to get into UI Builder on the show today. I've got about 5 slides that we'll run through fairly quickly, just to set the stage on what is UI Builder, what's Now Experience, and then we'll get into a demo and hopefully have a little bit of fun in the demo and really look at what you can do with UI Builder. And my goal is to get a good number of people watching to get into UI Builder and try building some things on your own. So let's jump in and take a look at kind of our roadmap, where we are with user experience in ServiceNow at this point. So you can see on the far left of this slide, we started in Quebec really with this current version of UI Builder. There was a previous version that came out, I think, in the Orlando release that was pretty limited, and in the Quebec release, we released this much better version of UI Builder, and that's really where you could start building these custom experiences in UI Builder. We had the CSM configurable workspace and App Engine Studio. Both of those let you work with that configurable workspace and spin up different types of experiences for your custom apps. In Rome, we made some of that a little bit better. And then, as we move forward into the next couple of releases, we are, again, working on making those experiences better in terms of kind of unifying all of your experiences on the platform into one cohesive experience in San Diego, and then in Tokyo to continue with making those experiences better. So let's get into some of the particulars here.
Hey, Brad, Kreg had a good note. He said, no safe harbor statement, so I'll do it. Hashtag safe harbor. There you go. So what was on that map is what we plan. If something doesn't come true, don't sue us.
All right. So modern tech stack. So this is probably my favorite slide when it comes to Now Experience, because there are a whole lot of terms out there that there's some terms we use internally. There's some terms that are floating around out there, and they really mean different things. And so I want to kind of walk through a few of these so that we all have the same basis for what we're talking about. The first one is the Now Experience UI framework, and this is really the underlying framework that all of our this new UX technology is built on top of. So the framework is kind of what everything else is built on top of. Then we have these Now Experience components, and components are built on the framework. They are, things that you can put into an instance. You give it some inputs, and it does some things, and it may give you some outputs. But the components are kind of the building blocks of your experiences. You can think of components in a similar way to service portal widgets. They are, the technology is totally different, but they kind of work the same way, where you can use UI Builder to drag and drop them onto the screen. And then the ServiceNow CLI, so CLI is command line interface, and the CLI is what you use if you want to build your own components. So right now, if you want to build your own components, you do that locally using the CLI. The easiest way to do that is to use the CLI. You end up scaffolding a component, and then you can use VS Code or whatever your favorite code editor is to actually build that component and then deploy it into your instance with the CLI. That is as much as we're going to get into custom components on this episode. And what we're going to spend most of our time on is the fourth box here, which is Now Experience UI Builder. So UI Builder is our WYSIWYG editor that lets you take components, drag them onto the page, and then kind of make them talk to each other. And that's what we're going to spend our time doing here. So we've got the framework, which is really the underlying framework for everything, for lack of a better word. And then we use that to build components and drag them onto Now Experience and make that work. So let's take a little bit deeper look at Now Experience components. The screenshot on this slide is actually the developer portal. So if you go to the developer site and go to Reference and then Components, you'll actually get the library of all of our components. And you'll see that some components are available directly in UI Builder. Some components are available through NPM, where you can actually pull them in locally and use them to create your own components. So you can use our smaller components, building block components, to create your own. And then it also has a lot of documentation around the components, like what do all their properties expect, what kind of events do they use. One of my favorite pieces of information on the developer side around components is a lot of them have this is how you should use them and this is how you shouldn't use them. So that's just wonderful information that we don't always get for things like that. So that's great. That's great stuff. And I think we've got, as of right now, there's more than 100 components that you can use by default in UI Builder. Speaking of UI Builder, UI Builder is what we're going to spend all of our demo in. I think this screenshot is not actually UI Builder. If I look at that, so that's fun. That's my bad. So UI Builder is a way for you to take components, you drag them onto this page, and then you can make them talk to each other. And so we are going to spend our demo doing that. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and get into the demo from here. So any questions before we get into the demo?
We just got one from Tim. He said, are we moving toward not having to use the CLI to make these things? The CLI isn't even easily accessible for independent developers.
Yeah, so Tim, that's a great question. So I think one of my goals for this demo is to show you that you really don't need to create custom components to build a custom experience. So I think that's really one of the biggest paradigm changes from Service Portal to the Now Experience UI framework. Is that the components that already exist are really powerful, and we're creating more and more of these components every day, to where your standard ServiceNow developer, I don't think they're going to have to build very many custom components. Whereas if you think about Service Portal, if you want to do anything just even a little bit outside of what widgets do by default, you pretty much have to know Angular and do some widget development. So in terms of creating custom components, right now that is happening locally, but I think the number of people that are going to need to do that is a lot lower than working with custom components. And hopefully, as we get into this demo, you'll kind of see, we're going to do a demo and do some custom things where you couldn't do that in Service Portal without editing widget code. All right, so let's get in. Hopefully, that was a decent answer to that. So I'm going to start in App Engine Studio, and Chuck, Jeremy, Kreg, y'all feel free to jump in with any thoughts or questions as we're running through this.
Careful what you ask for.
I don't really want to just talk for a half hour. So. So this is a very simple app that I built. It is a to-do app. So hopefully everybody has some experience with to-dos. Maybe you have done something before. I think we've all done something. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into a custom experience that I created from App Engine Studio for my to-do app. So I'm going to hit Edit here, and it's going to drop us into this experience. And I'm going to hit this little Maximize button that I didn't know existed for like a full 6 months after I had been using App Engine Studio. That gives me some more vertical screen real estate. And I'm going to start by, let's take a look at this for a minute here. This is UI Builder. And when you create an experience from App Engine Studio, you get a number of pages by default. and you get some other things around your experience. Where if you do need to create a custom experience, creating it through App Engine Studio is absolutely the easiest and best way to do that. It is technically possible to create an experience through Studio, but you have to do a lot more work to get everything to the point where you have it in App Engine Studio. All right, so I'm going to create a page, and then we'll kind of talk through what all these different pieces are. So let's create a new page. When I create a page, so we're going to call this to do demo. It's going to give me a path by default, and it's going to tell me what URL I'm going to use for that path. And then another thing that we have that we're not going to use for this demo, but is good to know that's here, is you have a lot of these page templates. And so these are pages that already have a lot of the components and other things configured for that page. So if I need a record page where I just want to show, a record view, and I need that to live in my experience, I can create that using a page template. And then when I do that, I have a couple of options here where I can say, use the original template. And what that means is this page is essentially read-only to where I can't really do anything to the page, but also if this page gets updated as part of the new release, it'll get updates, or I can get a fully customizable page, which means, I own that page. So, that choice really depends on how much you need to customize the page. But for right now, we're going to start from scratch and create a blank page here. All right. So before we get into the page, we're also not going to use the parameters, but I can add URL parameters to my page where I can require parameters so my page doesn't load unless I have a parameter, or I can add optional parameters where you basically have some name value pairs that you can accept through the URL. So these are ways where I can pull in some data through the URL. And then use those parameters inside of my page. But this is going to be kind of a default page here. All right, so in UI Builder, there's a lot going on this page. So let's just talk through a little bit what is happening. So I have this bar at the top. And I've got a menu option where I can work with some different things. I've got a help option that's going to link me to different training spots. I think these are all to documentation. And then I have the URL here, and the URL is going to let me see, how I access this page. If I've got parameters, I can click on them up here and give them default values so that I can kind of test my page as I'm building it. I've got a little preview button. I can select my scope, and then I've got a save button that I can also use a keyboard shortcut to save, which was one of my favorite Roam enhancements to UI Builder. Then on the left here, I can go back to the UI Builder home. I can go back to pages. We're in a page right now. And then down here at the bottom, we're going to use each of these icons. So we'll get into what those are when it comes time to use them. But that gives me more options. Then on the left, this is a lot of kind of the metadata of my page. So I can switch pages to a different page up here. We already used this to create a new page. I can create new page variants. So a variant of a page is basically a different version of a page that I can show conditionally, either based on the persona of the person looking at the page or based on the contents of the page itself. And then here we have the content tree, and as we add components to the page, this will get built out. And then we'll find out more about this pane as we use it, but this is where we have use the properties and events for different components and containers. We have any good questions come in before we get into this?
Oh, we have questions.
Yeah.
Do you know if there are any plans to add more CSS custom properties to the UIB components? Some of the components, like the simple list component, have a UI color choice, that are hard-coded and can't be changed with the available UX theme custom property?
That is a great question. I don't know specifics about the specific components, but I do know that there are some nice things coming in the San Diego release related to CSS and theming. So that's probably as specific as we can get here. But that whole process does get a little easier. There's a lot. The discoverability definitely gets better.
This might also be a good time to remind people that we do have an idea portal that our product managers review. So if you've got ideas over on the community.servicenow.com, go to the top. There's a menu bar that says idea portal, and it's an upvote kind of thing. So put it in, socialize your idea, see if your friends will upvote it, and that helps direct where our product managers take the product and the features.
All right, so let's get into this demo. I'm going to go ahead and add a component. So in the middle here, this is kind of my page preview that's also interactive. I can work with it. So what we want to do, I guess, let me step back. What we want to do is we're going to add a list of my to-dos, and I want a way to be able to open each of them and then either complete or cancel them from the list. So it's a fairly simple straightforward thing. We're going to use a modal. One of my favorite things about UI Builder is how easy it is to create and work with modals. So that's what we're going to do because I got to pick what we did in the demo. So I'm going to add a container here. And a container is basically what it says. It's a container where I can add other components within it. So if you're not sure whether you need a container, I think most components should probably be in their own container because within a container, you can do things like change the way Flexbox works and things like that. But one thing I forgot to do before we got into that is I want to make, so what I did was for the body, I split it into these 3 different areas because when this gets rendered on a wide screen, I don't really want my whole content area to take the full screen. So we've got that container here in the middle, and I'm going to add a component to it real quick. So I'm going to add a stylized text component. So you'll see that we have a lot of components that are available by default. We've got all sorts of different field types, and there are some components that are as simple as a button, and there are some components that are as complex as these calendar components, which have a crazy amount of things going on. But we're going to use the stylized text component. So once I add a component, on the right over here, I'm going to get this config panel, and this has my component's properties. So this component has a couple of properties. It has a text property, and then it's got a tag property. So one of the really cool things about the stylized text component is that it's got this tag property. So I can just tell it, you're an H1 and H2. And then if I've been really consistent about using this, I can just style all of those things the same way. So if I want to change styles, if I've used the stylized text component, it's really easy to style all my H1s a certain way. So I'm going to say my to-dos. All right. And that is, I've changed the property. It gets reflected here. And then I'm going to add another container. Add component after. So I like to add my components from the content tree over here because I know exactly where they're going. And so we're going to add another container over here. And then within that container, we're going to add a list. So this is one of the components that has a little bit more going on. So if I add a list, you can see that it has a whole bunch of properties here that let me customize what's happening with the list. So I'm going to call this, we'll call it my to-dos. And then we're going to select my to-do table.
Can you nest your containers, Brad, while you're doing this?
You can nest your containers. So I'm going to say for this one, assigned to is going to be the logged in user. So another one of the enhancements from Quebec to Rome was this filter. The condition builder got rebuilt within UI Builder. And so that means that some of this can get a little more dynamic. We haven't looked at this dynamic data binding yet, but we will. So some of the things that you had to do in Quebec, you don't have to do anymore in the Rome release. So that's kind of nice. And we're going to sort by due date. And then I'm going to choose what fields I want. So if you don't choose, it's just going to give you a certain amount of fields by default. We're going to add some. I did pre-add a whole bunch of to-dos here. So let's go to due date. And state is going to be the last one. All right, so I'm going to save this. And then let's preview it. All right, let's open it in a new tab and kind of see what's going on here. All right, so we can see that I've got a few different to-dos in here. I've got my stylized text that we added. You can see that this list component, I can do some filtering, or I can't do any filtering. I can do some sorting. It is interactive. I can refresh it. So it's got some controls by default here. Some of the things that we have not seen on the page in UI Builder yet are this header and then the footer. And so real quick, the header and the footer are things that you can add to your experience, or they get added to your experience based on what kind of app shell you have selected. There's two main app shells to use right now. You can use a workspace app shell or a portal app shell. This is a portal app shell. For me, if I'm going to be working with a lot of different records, most of our fulfiller workspace or our fulfiller experiences now are workspaces. So if I'm going to be working with lots of records as a fulfiller, I'm going to use workspace. For me, if I'm going to do some sort of custom UI like we're doing here, I'm going to use portal. And I will say that if you need to offer some sort of services portal, service portal is still the way to do that. So there's not parity right now in terms of a UI Builder portal and service portal. If you need full catalog functionality and lots of knowledge-based functionality and things like that, service portal is still the way to go for some sort of enterprise service portal. And the portals through UI Builder are more for these kind of smaller experiences or just custom experiences where you need like a menu up top. All right, and then one thing you'll notice is if I click on something, nothing happens right now, right? So this is something that I still need to wire up. So this is when people add a list to their experience. One of the things that you'll see is that they'll add a list and think that this is going to work right away. And you actually do have to tell the component what to do when you click it, which is kind of nice because you can do different things, which we'll see here. All right. So now we're actually going to make some things work together. All right. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little person with some lines next to it, icon that's probably pretty small on your screen, but it's the middle icon out of these three. And that's going to bring up the client state parameters panel. So in UI Builder, a client state parameter is a way for you to manage the page's state, basically. If you think of the page itself as a big component, the client state parameters is a way to manage state. You can also think of these like a scratch pad. So I can write values to this to client state parameters at any time and then access those values from other places. So what we're going to do is we are going to add a client state parameter to track the sysid of a to-do. So what we're going to do is I want, whenever I click on this list, I want to track the sysid of that to-do that we clicked on. So I'm going to do that through this client state parameter. So I've created it, it's blank, and then we will end up using it. All right.
Any chance you can change the values, like the due date, as they get closer to like the due date, kind of like we would do styling in a list view? Is there a way to do that here?
Ooh, so how you would add some styling here? That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know that off the top of my head. So these, yeah. So the
Cool. We'll save that one for later.
Yeah, the list components themselves are similar to, they're the same components that are used in workspaces. So if you can do that in a workspace right now, you probably can do that through these components, but I don't know.
Okay.
All right, so we've got this client state parameter. And then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to use a data resource. So data resources are an important thing to understand. My page, the way for me to interact from my page to the ServiceNow server is to use data resources. So a lot of times when people first get into UI Builder, they open up a client script and then they start trying to write Glide Ajax. And in UI Builder, you actually can't use Glide Ajax. Using data resources are the right way to get data from the server and push data back to the server, and we'll do both of those here. So I'm going to do a get, lookup record. So I'm going to use a lookup record data resource. You can see over on the right here, these are the properties that are available in my data resource. I'm going to add it. So I'm going to tell it I want the to-do table. So again, what we want to do is when I select one of these to-dos, we want to get the rest of the data from it. So we've got to-do task. And then here's where we're going to get dynamic. So right now I could grab any of these specific to-dos. We don't want that. We want this to be dynamic. So I'm going to use this dynamic data binding icon. And that's going to give me access to all sorts of different properties. So I've got some different page properties. If I had some parameters through the URL, I could access those here. But what we want to do is we want to access that client state parameter that we just created. So I'm going to tell it the sysID of the record is whatever sysID exists in this client state parameter. And one of the nice things about this is if this value changes, it automatically goes and refreshes that data resource. All right, so return fields, I want the number. I'm going to want the name. And I'm going to want the sysID, I believe. One of the other nice things about data resources is it's going to return some JSON, and it's going to tell me what that JSON looks like over on the right here. So we can see that I'm going to get those three fields, and that each of them is going to have a value and a display value. All of these are the same. Well, let's go ahead and let's get one where they'll be different, just so we can see what it looks like. They're not in alphabetical order. So I added assign to, and so we can see here that obviously the value is a sysID and the display value is my name. All right, so we've got my client state parameter created. We're going to grab some data with a data resource. The next thing that we need to do is we need to create a modal. So I want to display all of this in a modal that pops up. So I'm going to get rid of this data resource panel. I'm also going to save by hitting Command S because the hair started standing up on my neck a little bit because I hadn't saved in a while. All right, so I'm going to add a modal, and I'm going to do that by going up to Content Add. I'm going to hit Modal, and then I get a bunch of different kinds of modals. I'm going to do a custom modal because that lets me kind of do whatever I want here. You can see that I've got a header, a body, and a footer, and then I automatically have this little close dialog button, which is pretty nice. I don't have to build that myself. So I'm going to go ahead, and we're going to add a stylized text here. And
Anybody who's
instead
built
of-
modals before knows the fun of passing parameters and
Yes,
building these things
right.
out. This is way, way nicer.
Nah, this looks great so far. So hurry
So
up,
what
Brad.
I'm gonna
I want to see
do-
the final product.
Oh yeah. Hopefully it works. So I'm going to use this dynamic data binding icon to where we're going to make what displays in this modal dynamic, hopefully. So I'm going to come down and we're going to use this data lookup record. And so I have that. I'm going to hit the dot and it's going to give me some options. So I want to display the number up here. I'm going to hit enter. And then I want the value. So this is an important step. Remember, each field gives me a value and display value. Or I want the display value. I'm going to show it. All right, so that's going to give me this to do. And then I want to show the name in the middle of it. If we were doing more things, I'd probably make this editable to where you could come and change the to do and save it. We're not going to do that in the interest of time. So the results, we want the name, and we want the display value. And then I want H3, and we'll go ahead and save. All right, so our last step, so if I close out of that, it's going to go away. I can still get back to it up here. But our last step is we need to connect clicking on our list to setting that client state parameter and then popping open the modal. So we've looked a lot at properties so far. So properties are how my components take in values. Or, that's my inputs for my components, right? We've set all these inputs to make my components display a certain way. Events are how they communicate with other components. So events are my component did something, now it needs to go and perform some sort of action. So each component has its own specific set of events. In my list component, it has this row clicked event. So I'm going to use my row clicked event. It's got some other events too, but the row clicked is the most important one. And so we have all of these event handlers that I can use. And so we're going to use this update client state parameter event handler first. And I'm going to set the to-do ID client state parameter value. And I'm going to set it to, so each event has a payload. And you can see that the payloads are unique to each of the events. Sometimes they are named really well, and it's pretty obvious what they do. Sometimes not so much. And we may not have time, but I think I've got a blog somewhere on how you can find out what the payload is passing. So we want the sysid, which is the sysid of the record. So if I hit add, when the row is clicked, it's going to update that client state parameter with the sysid, and then I want to add another event handler. And we're going to say this one's going to open or close a modal. So if I was being a really good developer, I would have named this modal something better than custom one, but I kind of forgot. So we're going to leave it custom one. And then by default, this little toggle is off. So if you want a modal to open, you have to toggle this on. So I'm going to hit add. I'm going to save, and then let's refresh. So what should happen when I click on one of these is it should open a modal, and then it should also update the client state parameter. So if I click on it, all right, that looks right. Let's open another one just to make sure. All right, and I opened it, and it got the right one. All right, so this is working. I can also, yeah, we'll use the a button in just a minute. All right. So we have now done a few different things in UI Builder. We haven't written any code yet, which is kind of cool, and we have not needed to build any custom components to make any of this work. Hopefully this helps a little bit with the, with the whole building custom components thing. I do think we do have time to finish this. So what I want to do is I want to add a data resource that is going to let me update these records. So I'm going to do that by coming in and going update record. So I'm going to add this. And the update record data resource is kind of unique because it doesn't have any properties. And the way that you interact with it is through a script. So I'm going to change the name on this one to update to do because we're going to call it by its name. All right, so I've got that data resource created. Doesn't really do anything yet because we have to invoke it, and we're going to invoke it from a script here. So I'm going to add a page script, and we're going to call it complete to do because that's what it's going to end up doing. And through the magic of a prepared demo, I'm going to write some code very quickly. Basically what we're doing here is we are going to pass this data resource. We're going to pass it a table name. So this is where the record exists. We're going to pass it the sysID of the record. So this is my client state parameter. The way that I interact with it through a client script is by api.state, the name of the client state parameter. And then this template fields property is going to expect an encoded query. So if you're new to ServiceNow, an encoded query may not mean much to you. If you've worked with ServiceNow for a while, encoded queries are how we track the query, for lack of a better description. So this is how we tell it what we want to update. So state is completed. If I had another value, I could do the vertical caret and then keep going. And then am I sending display values or values? So we're sending values here. So this should go to that table, go to the record, and then change the state to completed when I execute. So couple more things we need to do. So we've got our script here. And now I need to go to my modal, expand view, and I'm going to add a component to the footer. I'm going to add a button component. And then I don't like my button on the left here. It seems like buttons are on the right normally through a modal. So I'm going to come into the footer. This is a slot. So my modal has 3 slots. It's got this title slot, the main slot, and a footer slot. I'm going to change the flex direction from column to row. So instead of vertically, things are going to go horizontally. I'm going to tell it to go to the end of the row, and we'll say put it in the middle. All right, so now we're over on the right here. You can see that as I do all of those things, it does update these CSS styles, so I could add some padding here. Right, we've got some padding in there. But let's get into our button itself. So I'm going to make it a primary button. We're going to make it big, and we will say, it's going to say complete to do. We can also give it an icon here. So maybe we give it like a check mark. And then that looks good. So the last thing we need to do is look at its events. So a button is very simple. It has one event, and it gets clicked. So I'm going to add an event handler to the button. And we will notice that I added that complete to-do script, and it now shows up as an event handler. So for my complete to-do script, I can go ahead and click on it and hit add. And then it's going to complete the to-do. I want it to do one more thing where I also want it to go ahead and close the modal for me. So I'm going to leave that off. We'll hit add. So I'm going to save. And let's see if this works. So get more beard oil. I did that recently, so let's go ahead and complete that one. So I completed it. Let's hit refresh. Try it again. Oh. And the wonderful live demo curse hits me. It is not working, and I know why it's not working. All right, we can fix this. It is not working because I wrote this script on a different instance where the table name is different. Where's my? Let's get the right table name. Where's my? Oh. This is one of those things where you know there's a better way to do this, but you're on a live demo and your brain doesn't really work. So that's the way that we got the table name. So I'm going to come in here. We're going to update that table name. And
Brad, we got a couple of questions about this now. Is there any auto refresh on these lists? I noticed you refreshed the list manually, or is there anything to make them dynamically update, or is everything manual at this point?
There is, and if for some reason I got through this demo really early, I was going to show how to do that, but we'll probably have like a follow-up blog or something where I'll show how to do that. So there is a way to auto refresh this list. So we just didn't do that yet in the interest of time. So this did work. So that was good. It changed to completed. You could, there's lots of different things we could add here. I don't think we have time because we want to get to some questions. But yes, you can tell the page to refresh. What we would actually do is we would tell this component itself to refresh, which the component has a property around refreshing. And I can show that here. So if we look at it, it does have this little refresh property. It's not incredibly straightforward how to work with it, but we do have some resources on that somewhere. So I think this is a good stopping point for the demo, and we can maybe take some questions. So
we can take some questions. Is UI Builder or the workspaces compatible with ATF?
Oh, that is a good question. I believe there is some compatibility right now, and as always with ATF, we're working on adding more compatibility. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure where we are with that right now. So, it uses the same technology as Agent Workspace, but yeah, we'll have to see about that one.
The button still accepts keyboard inputs like enter and space as well? Question mark. If so, does that still send the on-click event?
I am not sure. Oh, so yes. If the button does accept keyboard inputs, then yes, it would send the on-click event. I'm not sure whether it does.
Yeah, one of the questions, Brad, was about how to get information and resources. I did share out, and hopefully everyone can see it, the link to our Center of Excellence for Now Experience. And then also sent you a link to the component library. There's lots of good stuff, API usage and things there that can help. And, of course, Brad's got tons of wonderful information. I feel like he's been heads down for months in this technology. So another question.
Before you go, I saw the question like what API contains. Those are documented on the developer site under client-side code. API is there, and then like helpers. So those are all documented.
Another question from Bala: can we modify CSS for components like border colors and text alignments?
Yeah, so there are a number of, we didn't get into CSS. There's a pretty good live coding happy hour that we did where we got deeper into CSS and theming. But basically, a lot of these components have theming hooks where the component itself has a way for you to tell it how you want some of the things to be styled. So you're kind of limited into what theming hooks that component uses and exposes. But if a component exposes a theming hook, then you can style it through the theme. And that process, I think, gets a little easier in the future.
So on the stylized text component that you're working with, what is the difference between the Edit CSS button in the Config tab and the CSS box on the Styles tab?
Yes. So the Styles tab gives you, the Styles tab basically lets you style like the container of the component. And then that CSS box does let you do some styling within the component, I believe. But that would be something you could go in and play with for sure.
Brad, do you know how to set roles on or set roles to the variants? First, we better explain what variants are, because that's kind of a bad word these days.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've had a few different like pop culture variants, right? So the variant in the UI builder sense is basically just a version of the page. And once you create a variant, you order the different variants of the page, and then you can create audiences, and then tell each variant what audience can access that variant of the page. So the audiences are generally role oriented. I think we released something where you can use something that has some parity with user criteria with it as well. So you can do it role-based, or you can also display variants based on the URL parameters. So if I pass one URL parameter, I show a different variant. So both of those are possible with the variants.
Okay, so the key to setting those roles is to look for that audience setting. Is that correct?
Yeah. So you create an audience. The audience is basically like, it could be somebody with a number of these roles, and then they see a page or variant of the page.
One of the questions was about building agent workspace and configurable in UIB, and the answer is yes, you can do both. We did do a session back in February on agent workspace, but what we've been talking about today is configurable. So they're definitely two different things used in UIB, but you will have limited access to components using building agent workspace versus configurable. So.
Yeah, they're actually different versions of UIB. So if you open an agent workspace in UI Builder, you get the old version of UI Builder.
I'll go ahead and ask this one, Brad. I gave my answer to it already, but responsiveness, big question, especially as we start to talk about portal configuration. I know a lot of what we've been talking about is, back-end agent view. But responsiveness is a question. Do we have an idea of a release on that other than TBD? That it is coming, but just not sure when.
I don't know. So it is UI Builder created experiences are not currently responsive. There are some things that you can do to kind of make it work a little bit, but if you really need a responsive user interface, then the answer to that still is Service Portal. The UIB stuff's not responsive, and I don't have a release on that.
Can we configure agent workspaces created before Quebec using UI Builder?
You will get the old version of UI Builder, so you won't be able to use any of the events or any of the interactive stuff that we've done. So in agent workspace, the biggest thing is that the components can't talk to each other through events the way that we have exposed events in the newer version of UI Builder.
Bobby wants to know what flavor of seltzer you're drinking.
It is blackberry citrus.
That's a live coding happy hour question right there.
Yeah.
All right. So a couple of things. These are kind of exciting. So on Now Learning, there's a new UIB fundamentals course. That's that first bullet. devlink.sn/UIB fund NL. All these links will be posted somewhere, so you don't need to frantically copy them down. So that course came out, I think, less than a month ago, and so that's a pretty good course. And then on the developer site, we also have a UI Builder course that the first module came out maybe 2 months ago, and I believe there's now 5 modules with more to be released. So really in the last couple of months, a lot of new UI Builder training content has come out. So I put out a bunch of stuff from the Quebec release onward, and then now the people like who are professional content creators put out stuff that is actually useful. So both of those are really good. If you want to get started with UI Builder, I would start with one of those and then do the other one. And then go in and try to build something yourself. As I think that's always the best way to learn something, get some of the fundamentals down. Go in, try to build something yourself, get out in the community, ask questions. The sndevs.com Slack has a UI Builder and Now Experience channel in it to ask some questions. So yeah, get out, play with it, and see what you run into and what you can build.
And before we go, we have one final send-off. Kreg Steppe has been doing TechNow with us for 7 years. This is his last episode. Thank you so much for all the help, Kreg, and the content you've presented over the years. That's one of our better pictures together.
I would agree. I don't know why I'm making like a horse face. It looks like Mr. Ed. But yeah, thank you very much, and it's been fun. I'll still be around in case the need be.
Backup plan. Yep. Thank you very much. And quick reference information in case you didn't get it live on the resource panel. We've got documentation. We've got the developer portal that we mentioned before. And all of our episodes to TechNow are available at devlink.sn/TechNow. Look forward to seeing you there. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And we will see you again real soon. Be safe. Take care. Bye.